So Skull and Bones was founded in 1832. There were two gentlemen named William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft. Alphonso Taft is the grandfather of President Taft, who went on a few decades later to become president. He also was a Supreme Court judge, Alphonso Taft. Now, William Huntington Russell, he founded one of the first National Guards in the United States, and his family is very wealthy. But both of these men were inspired by some things that they learned at the University of Berlin one summer between their junior and senior years of college. They came back and they started this Skull and Bones, allegedly another chapter of something that they were a part of in Germany. Um, and That's where it all began in 1832. Now, at the time, these sort of college groups were not unpopular. It was the way things operated. You went to college, you joined a social club based on your interests, and those social clubs kind of helped you get a career or network to uh, really become something of yourself after college. And during the 1800s, the early 1800s, there was a man named William Morgan who wrote a book exposing some rituals from the Freemasons, and the Freemasons killed him. When this was discovered, the whole nation panicked and they said, "We can't trust these Freemasons. They're willing to break the law and kill people to keep their secrets." So, people freaked out, and naturally, there were politicians who came about that said, "Oh, well, we're not going to have Freemasons in office anymore. Vote for us," right? And because of this kind of panic, a lot of the groups in these colleges that were sort of semi-Freemasonic, or maybe even like stepping stones to become a Freemason in some cases, they shifted gears. Instead of being secret private organizations, they became public charitable organizations. And that's why we have all of these public charitable, brotherhoods now, like the Shriners and the Lions Club and all these other, Key Club, you name it. There's the Rotary Club. Like, it's just a thing in American culture. People, in a small town, especially the men will all join, the Kiwanis Club or the Lions Club, and they go and they have like a meeting once a week there. And talk about whatever, like just not like global affairs and some nefarious stuff, but it's just the way sociologically small towns are organized. Well, in the 1830s, when all of this became kind of uh, dodgy and suspicious, some groups, like I said, went public, but groups like Skull and Bones went even more private. They were like, okay, we're not even going to advertise. We're just going to secretly initiate people to join. 15 people per year. They have to be Yale juniors. At first, they were only men, only white, which for the most part in the 1800s, that's the only people that were going to Yale and Harvard back then. It's just the way the country was back then. But when you ask like, well, what is Skull and Bones? Who founded it? Who are these guys? Really, their power and their sort of impetus comes from their connections to the opium trafficking networks that were a part of British, Chinese, and Dutch history. Very much a part of those three nations' history, probably others as well. But when it comes to William Huntington Russell, his cousin, Samuel Russell, was the premier opium smuggler at that time. And some people might suggest or argue that these men, with their influence from these sort of powerful positions that they got themselves in through their prowess in school, were able to then create the environment for a black market of drugs to be sold to the immigrants here in the United States. Because you got to keep in mind, in the 1800s, the immigrants were, for the most part, Irish, Chinese, Italian, um, There's probably others. And then the Native Americans were also a big part of this time period as well, being kind of pushed off of the frontier, being, war waged against them, not just physically, but with psychological weapons like alcohol. So, I think the same thing was being done, and uh, this is proven with the Opium Wars. They did this to the Chinese, where they flooded the culture with opium and, you know, effectively kneecapped a fighting force. And I don't think China to this day has forgiven England and the West for that. It seems like, I've heard some people say that the fentanyl stuff is like a retaliation from what happened all the way back then in the Opium Wars. So, this kind of stuff has been going on for quite a while. The connections are obvious. When you look at a guy like George H.W. Bush, who was Skull and Bones, he was also the ambassador to China at some point in his political career. Why? Why is a guy from New England, a guy from New England who pretends to be a cowboy? I mean, you guys might not be so familiar, but George W. Bush, his son, the big thing that, oh, we're from Texas, we're cowboys. Meanwhile, they grew up in freaking Connecticut, which is where I'm from. There's no cowboys here. So yeah, they think that they're, like these I don't know, royalty, American royalty. That's essentially what these families have positioned themselves as, is American royalty. They've used schools like Harvard, Yale, the College of William and Mary historically to become the robber baron, the industrial barons of the early 1900s, late 1800s. That group of people that amassed an incredible amount of wealth, they did so by, you know, sort of playing this nepotism through the American institutions as they were growing. They instilled it with the same nepotism that allegedly they were avoiding by leaving Europe, right? They were sick of the king and the monarchy and the royalty, yet they went and recreated it here in the United States. You just can't teach old dogs new tricks, I guess. But yeah, it seems like Yale, Skull and Bones, from the beginning had an agenda to wield power, and in a sort of clandestine way. The first spy in American history comes from New Haven, and that's no coincidence that Yale would find its way, you know, to having this Skull and Bones group, and then 100 years after that, the CIA is founded. These are all sort of connected in this very loose way.